Have you ever wondered why, as a chosen one, being around too many people feels more like a burden than a blessing? Why does your soul yearn for quiet moments while the world seems obsessed with crowds and constant noise? Maybe you found yourself in a room full of people, laughter echoing, conversations buzzing, yet felt like you didn't belong, as if an invisible wall separated you from it all. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. Before this journey ends, you'll understand exactly why chosen ones like you can't be around lots of people, not because you're odd in a bad way, but because a divine purpose awaits you in that separation. Imagine stepping into a crowded party, bright lights, lively chatter, the air buzzing with energy. For most, it's a delight, a chance to connect, but for you, it's like a whirlwind pulling you under, draining your spirit instead of lifting it. You might smile, shake hands, join the talk, but deep inside, you're longing to escape, to find a quiet spot where you can breathe freely again. That's not shyness or detachment, it's the mark of a chosen soul. One carrying a weight not everyone can see or comprehend. The world might view you as just another face in the crowd, but God sees you as someone destined for something greater, a mission that requires you to step out of the chaos and into stillness. The solitude you feel isn't the empty loneliness people often assume, it's a sacred space. A season God uses to prepare you for what's ahead. Think of Jesus, he frequently left the crowds behind, retreating to quiet hills or deserted places to pray, to connect with his Father. He didn't do this because he rejected humanity, but because he knew his purpose demanded moments of separation, where he could recharge and hear God's voice clearly. You're the same. Your calling isn't to blend into the world's clamor, but to seek his presence in the silence. Today, we'll uncover why this separation isn't just a fleeting feeling, but a core part of the chosen one's journey. And to bring it to life, we'll share Matthew's story, an ordinary man with an extraordinary destiny. Matthew didn't just survive his seasons of solitude, he found strength and meaning in them, becoming a living testament to what being chosen truly means. His life will show you that solitude isn't punishment or abandonment, it's preparation. A path to the greatness God ordained for you before you even took your first breath. The solitude you feel as a chosen one isn't the empty loneliness the world often labels it, it's a spiritual journey. A space God uses to prepare you for your destiny. Imagine it like an ancient forge, where the blazing fire doesn't consume you but refines you, burning away impurities to reveal the true strength hidden deep within. When you stand alone, far from the crowd's noise, it's not a sign of failure or abandonment, it's the hallmark of a chosen soul. One being shaped in the flames of purpose. God isn't thrusting you into this separation to harm you, he's purifying you, forging you for a calling so grand that not everyone can see or comprehend it. When you're alone, have you ever felt a strange peace flood your heart? Have you noticed how, in those quiet moments, your mind sharpens, as if a gentle voice is whispering profound truths into your spirit? That's not random, it's God's presence working within you. Solitude isn't the curse the world makes it out to be, it's a hidden blessing. A gift reserved for the chosen so they can hear his voice amid a world drowning in chaotic sounds. When you step into that stillness, you're not fleeing life, you're entering a space where life truly begins, where your purpose takes form bit by bit. But it's not always easy, is it? The world doesn't understand why you crave solitude, they see it as strange, something to fix. They ask why you don't dive into crowded gatherings, why you don't chase the loud joys or endless chatter. They can't grasp that your calling transcends what eyes can see, it's a fire smoldering within you, a flame that needs room to blaze instead of being snuffed out by the crowd's clamor. Your solitude isn't a rejection of society, it's a divine preparation. A season where God pulls you from the chaos so he can work in you without the interference of outside voices. It's this very difference that often leaves you feeling misunderstood. Have you ever stood among a group, laughing, talking, yet felt like you're in another world? Like you're speaking a language they can't decipher? Like they look at you but don't truly see the real you inside? It's not their fault, they weren't chosen to carry the weight you bear, weren't given the vision God planted in your heart. Your difference isn't something to hide or be ashamed of, it's the sign of a sacred calling. A light that makes you stand out even when you're not trying to shine. Think of Joseph in the Bible, the one with the vibrant, multicolored coat. He didn't choose to be different, God placed a unique mark on him. setting him apart from his brothers like a beacon in the dark. And what happened? They didn't understand him, they envied his dreams, felt threatened by his uniqueness, and ultimately betrayed him, selling him into slavery. But Joseph's separation wasn't the end, it was the doorway to a greater plan God had prepared. In those lonely years, locked away in a prison cell, Joseph was refined, ready to become the savior of a nation from famine. His difference wasn't a curse, it was the path to his grand purpose. You're like that too. Your difference might push people away, might make them misunderstand you, even turn their backs on you. But it's not something to fear. When you feel out of place in a crowd, when shallow small talk fails to fill your heart, it's because you were made for something deeper, greater. God placed a fire in you that not everyone can see or feel, and that fire needs space to burn brightly. Needs separation to avoid being extinguished by the winds of doubt or external pressures. The crowd might not get you, but they don't have to. Your purpose isn't for their approval. It's for God to use you as He's planned. Picture yourself as a precious gem being polished in the dark. The world hasn't yet seen your true worth. But God does. He knows your solitude is necessary to shield you from distractions, to keep your vision pure, to ensure you're not swept away by voices trying to pull you off His path. When you're alone, you're not isolated, you're being cherished, prepared for a moment when God will bring you into the light. Stronger, clearer, and more ready than ever to walk in your mission. This solitude isn't permanent, it's a season, a phase God uses to build you from the inside out. Think of a young tree planted in a sheltered garden. It needs time away from harsh winds to sink its roots deep, to grow sturdy before facing the outer world. You're that tree. Solitude is God's sacred garden for you, where He waters you with His presence, where He anchors your faith's roots into the soil of His promises. The crowd might not understand why you need this time, but God does, and He's working in you, day by day, moment by moment, to ready you for what He's ordained since before you were born. Jesus, the ultimate chosen one, is the most vivid example that solitude isn't just natural, but a core element in the journey of those with a divine mission. He didn't live to chase the crowd's applause or blend into the world's chaos. Instead, He often slipped away from people, seeking quiet places to pray, to recharge His soul. The Bible notes this time and again, like in Luke chapter 5 verse 16. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. He didn't do this out of fear or frailty. He did it because He knew His grand purpose required moments of separation, where He could hear His Father's voice without it being drowned out by human noise. Picture Him standing on a grassy hill, beneath a vast blue sky or a fading sunset, with only the soft breeze and His Father's whisper echoing in His heart. Those moments weren't escape, they were His strength. He didn't linger to please everyone, didn't stay for praise or adoration from the masses. He knew human affirmation was fleeting. It could lift you up one second and drop you the next. Instead, He anchored Himself in an eternal bond, His connection with His Father, and that could only be fortified in stillness, away from the world's eyes and voices. One of the most powerful examples of this is the miracle of feeding the 5,000. Imagine the scene, a sprawling field, thousands of people seated on the grass, hungry and waiting. Jesus, with just 5 loaves and 2 fish, performed the impossible. He fed them all, every last one. The crowd erupted in awe. They cheered, they praised, they wanted more, they craved more signs, more wonders, more of Him. John chapter 6 verse 15 tells us they even wanted to seize Him and make Him king right there, to set Him on an earthly throne to fulfill their every desire. But what did Jesus do? He didn't stay to bask in the glory or revel in their acclaim. He slipped away, retreating to a mountain alone, leaving the crowd behind in their astonishment. Why did He do that? Why not stay, seize the chance to be exalted, to stand at the center of attention? Because He understood His mission wasn't rooted in human praise, it was rooted in His Father's will. He didn't need the crowd to define His worth, didn't need their cheers to fuel Him. He knew His true strength, His wisdom, anointing, and resolve came from solitary hours in God's presence, not from the world's spotlight. He left the crowd not because He didn't love them, He loved them deeply, but because He knew staying would distract Him from the greater purpose He was sent to fulfill. This carries a profound lesson for you. If Jesus, perfect, the only Son of God, needed time alone to sustain His mission, how can you, a chosen one, Think you don't need the same? He's a radiant example, showing that solitude isn't something to shy away from or be ashamed of. It's a wellspring of spiritual strength. A place where you find clarity in a chaotic world. When he climbed quiet hills or hid in deserted places, he wasn't swayed by cheers or endless demands. He was free to pray, to listen, to prepare for what lay ahead, whether it was the next miracle or the final trial on the cross. Imagine finding such a place for yourself, a quiet corner in your life, where no voices compete for your attention, where no pressures pull you off course. That's where you can stand before God, letting Him fill you with His presence, letting Him whisper the plans He's laid out for your life. Jesus showed us you don't always need to be among people. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step away, find a still place, and let God work within you. The crowd might call your name, might want you to stay in their spotlight forever, but He taught us you don't have to answer. Your mission demands focus, and that focus comes only in separation. Today's world is no different from that crowd of 5,000. They always want more, always want you present, always pull you into their whirlwind. But like Jesus, you weren't made to linger in fleeting glory. Your calling is higher. It requires seasons where you withdraw, not to hide, but to recharge, to anchor yourself in your true source of strength. When he slipped away to the mountain after the miracle, it wasn't arrogance or selfishness. He simply knew time alone with his Father was vital to keep his soul steady, to prepare him for what remained ahead. You're called to live this way too, not to please the masses, not to chase their approval, but to walk in the purpose God placed on your life. The solitude he chose wasn't weakness, it was strength, wisdom, the way he kept his vision clear. And when you do the same, when you seek quiet moments alone with God, you'll find it's not a loss, it's a gain. A place where you're equipped to face whatever your path brings. Solitude isn't just a choice, it's a necessity, an indispensable part of the journey for those who are chosen. Just because the crowd calls your name, just because they cheer and want you to stay among them, doesn't mean you have to answer or linger in their glow. Think about it. The world constantly demands your presence. They want you to show up, to join in, to flow with the endless stream of noise and chaos. But you weren't made to stand forever in their spotlight. You were chosen to walk a higher path, one that requires you to step away from the masses to find your true strength and stillness. Picture yourself in a crowded room, voices rising from every direction, laughter mixing with endless stories, people pulling you into conversations you don't really want to have. In that moment, you feel your heart grow heavy, as if your energy is draining away bit by bit. The crowd might be cheering you, might be lifting you up, but deep down, you know you don't belong there. That's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign that your purpose demands a quiet space. A place where you can hear God's voice amid the clamor trying to drown him out. Solitude is essential to protect your soul from unnecessary distractions, to keep your vision sharp and pure. Today's world is overflowing with noise, social media buzzing non-stop, societal pressures weighing on your shoulders, uninvited opinions trying to shape you into their mold. Those sounds are like a storm, ready to snuff out the flame God ignited within you if you're not careful. Think of it like a small candle. If you let it burn in a room full of drafts, the flame will flicker and die. But if you take that candle to a quiet corner, shield it from the chaotic gusts, it'll burn bright and steady. You're that candle. Solitude is where you safeguard your flame, the flame of your vision, your anointing, your destiny God has given you. This doesn't mean you hate people or want to live cut off forever, no. Solitude is a season, a vital phase to recharge and prepare for what's ahead. But be honest with yourself. When you're constantly among the crowd, endlessly pulled into pointless chatter or ceaseless demands, don't you feel your soul getting cluttered? Don't you start losing touch with yourself, with God, with the purpose you know is waiting for you? That's why you can't be around too many people. Your spirit can't handle that mess. And your mission demands a focus that only stillness brings. Imagine an artist painting a stunning masterpiece. If he works in a noisy crowd, with shouts and hands reaching for his canvas, can he finish his art? No, he needs a quiet studio, where he can focus, where he can hear the inner voice guiding each brushstroke. You're that painting, and God's the artist. He needs you in a still place to perfect his work in you. The crowd might not get why you need to step away, why you can't always show up to every gathering, but that doesn't matter. Solitude is necessary to keep you on track. The world won't stop trying to pull you back. They'll call you strange, Say you're missing out on life's joys. Insist you should blend in more to be like them. But you weren't made to fade into the crowd. You were chosen to stand apart. To carry a light not everyone's ready to receive. When you're around too many people, those voices, whether praise or criticism, can dilute the power of the vision God gave you. They might unintentionally drag you off your path, make you doubt yourself, make you forget you're not here to please them, but to fulfill a greater purpose. Think of a ship on the ocean. If it stays docked at the harbor forever, surrounded by other boats and the clamor of the port, it'll never set sail, never reach its destination. But when it leaves the shore, when it heads into the vast, quiet sea, it can raise its sails and chart its course. You're that ship, the crowd is the harbor, and solitude is the open water, where you find your direction, where you can hear God guiding you through the waves. Not everyone's qualified to join you on this voyage. Not everyone's equipped to grasp the anointing you carry, and sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is cast off from the dock and drift into stillness. Solitude isn't something to dread, it's vital to shield your soul. To keep you from being swept into valueless chatter or voices questioning your fate. When you step away from the crowd, when you find a quiet place to be alone with God, you're not isolated, you're being fortified, equipped for what lies ahead. That's where you find clarity. Where you hear Him louder than ever. Where you're reminded you're not here to live up to others' expectations, but to walk in the plan He's laid out for you. One of the most profound moments showcasing the necessity of solitude is when Jesus entered the Garden of Gethsemane, where He faced the darkest hour of His life. Picture the scene. Thick darkness blanketing the garden. Ancient olive trees standing like silent witnesses. The air heavy with an eerie stillness broken only by His slow footsteps. He wasn't alone in a literal sense. His disciples, His closest companions, followed behind, but even their presence couldn't calm the storm raging within Him. Matthew chapter 26 verses 36 to 39 recounts how He told them, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." Then He ventured deeper into the shadows, beyond their sight, until it was just Him and His Father in that decisive moment. Imagine Him kneeling on the cold ground, hands clenched, sweat streaming down His face as He prayed with all the anguish of a breaking heart. "Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." He knew what lay ahead: Judas's betrayal, the brutal lashes, the agonizing cross. In that moment, He didn't just carry His own burden, He carried the weight of all humanity. But why did He choose to be alone? Why not keep His disciples close, to hold His hand, to whisper comfort in that horrific hour? Because His destiny was too vast, His purpose too critical to be swayed by anyone, even those who loved Him most. The disciples couldn't comprehend. They fell asleep while He prayed, leaving Him alone to wrestle with His fear and surrender. He needed solitude to grapple with His own will, to face the cross looming ahead, to hear His Father amid the emotional tempest roaring within. In that garden, His sweat fell like drops of blood, soaking the cold earth, a sign of immense strain, but also proof of the strength He found in that separation. No cheering crowd, no human praise, just Him and His Father's divine presence. And in that solitude, He rose, stepped out of the garden's shadows, ready to meet His fate with a resolve only stillness could provide. If Jesus needed solitude in that hour to fulfill His mission of redeeming the world, then you, a chosen one, need such moments too. To carry the burden God placed on your life. He modeled for us that separation isn't escape, it's preparation. Where you find the power to walk through your greatest trials. In Gethsemane, He wasn't swept away by others' emotions, wasn't distracted by comfort or debate. He anchored Himself in His Father's will. And that could only happen in stillness, where no voice but God's could reach Him. From that example, the advice for you shines clearer than ever. Don't fear solitude. Don't see it as a daunting shadow or a burden to avoid, embrace it as a gift. A sacred space where God works within you. Don't dismiss those alone moments. Don't think they're signs of weakness or failure. It's in that stillness, when no noise competes for your attention, when no eyes judge you, that God speaks to you most clearly. Picture yourself in an empty field, with only the wind rustling by and His whisper in your heart. That's where your purpose is refined, where your faith is fortified, where your soul is empowered to face what's ahead. The world might not understand why you need these moments. They might think you're odd, that you're missing life's joys, that you should be among people more. But you don't live to please them. you live for a higher calling. One that requires you to step away from the crowd to dwell in God's presence. Solitude isn't something to dread, it's where you're readied for greater things. Where you're forged to bear the glory God destined for you. When you feel the Holy Spirit drawing you into stillness, don't resist, lean into it. Let solitude envelop you, for that's where you'll find your true strength. Where you'll hear His voice resounding in your soul. Once upon a time, there was a man named Matthew, an ordinary soul with an extraordinary destiny. Chosen by God for a specific purpose that would shape him into a man of success. Not by the world's standards, but by the divine blueprint written for his life from the beginning. Matthew didn't grow up in glamour or wealth, he was born in a small town. Where people lived simple lives, days passing with familiar routines. But even as a child, Matthew felt something different stirring within him, a deep calling. A sense that he wasn't just part of the crowd, but someone destined for something greater. While other kids played in the yard, chasing fleeting joys, Matthew often sat alone under an old oak tree, gazing at the sky and wondering about life's meaning. He wasn't driven by peer pressure or a need to fit in, on the contrary. He found peace in solitary moments, where he could hear the whisper of something eternal echoing in his soul. Those around him didn't understand, they thought him odd. A quiet boy who preferred his own thoughts over the crowd's laughter. But Matthew didn't mind. He knew his path wasn't random, but a divine intent slowly unfolding day by day. As he grew, Matthew began to see his difference not as a burden, but as a gift. He didn't chase the temporary pleasures or outward success his peers sought, loud parties, meaningless rivalries to prove themselves. Instead, he was drawn to quiet places, a corner of his bedroom with a worn Bible. A trail through the woods where he could reflect uninterrupted. In those moments, he felt closer to God than ever, like He was whispering plans for his future, guiding him step by step toward a purpose he didn't yet fully grasp. By his 20s, that call grew sharper. Matthew felt a weight in his heart, not sadness, but a burning desire to become a force for good, to build something beyond himself. God had planted a vision in him, clear and powerful, to be a leader. Not for power or fame, but to bring glory to Him through his work. But that path wasn't easy. His family didn't understand why he turned down the steady jobs they expected, a safe, predictable life. His friends drifted away, unable to fathom why he no longer cared for gatherings or the thrills they once shared. Some nights, Matthew sat alone, hearing distant laughter, wondering if he'd chosen the wrong road. The pressure of isolation bore down on him. He felt like an outsider. A man who didn't belong in the world others lived in. But then, in a moment of doubt, he opened his Bible, and his eyes landed on Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. That promise lit up the darkness within him. It reminded him his solitude wasn't a dead end, but part of a journey God designed to prepare him for something greater. Matthew started embracing his separation. He realized those quiet moments weren't punishment, they were where God refined him, equipping him with wisdom and strength he'd need later. He didn't falter under the world's resistance. He knew the narrow road God led him on wouldn't be crowded, but it would be worth every sacrifice. He began working hard, not for wealth or fame, but to build something lasting, a business reflecting his integrity and faith. He took no shortcuts, made no compromises. He worked with patience, trusting God's timing would come. As time passed, Matthew's purpose grew clearer. He wasn't just a seeker of God, he was a beacon, chosen to succeed in a way that mirrored His glory. His influence expanded, not because he sought attention, but because people began seeing God's favor in his life. His words carried weight, rooted in truth and closeness to God. His actions bore the mark of a man destined for success, not because he chased acclaim, but because he stayed faithful to the call God placed on him. Then one night, as Matthew knelt in prayer in his quiet room, God confirmed what he'd always known deep down. You were chosen for this. The success you'll experience isn't for your glory, but for mine. In that moment, a profound peace washed over him. He knew the years of solitude, the trials, the sacrifices were all part of a bigger plan. His success wasn't like others, not in riches or crowd approval, but in fulfilling the unique purpose God entrusted to him. Matthew became a living testament that being chosen isn't about blending into the world, but walking in obedience and faith, even if it means walking alone. Chosen ones, let this sink deep into your heart. When God selects you for a specific purpose, it often means walking a path unlike those around you. But don't let that difference scare you. Be bold. For the success that comes from God isn't fleeting like what the world chases, it's eternal, lasting, and carries a meaning far beyond temporary applause. Your road might not be crowded, might not glitter with lights or ring with cheers, but it's paved with God's promises, promises of hope, of a future He's prepared for you before you even took your first breath. Picture yourself at a crossroads. One side is a wide, bustling path, filled with people, laughter echoing, lights sparkling from endless celebrations. That road looks inviting, easy. It beckons you to blend in, to become part of the crowd, to live a life everyone approves of. But the other side is narrower, quieter, with just a few footprints in the dirt, leading into a deep forest where you can't see the end. That path doesn't promise instant comfort, no welcoming cheers, but in your spirit, a still, small voice whispers it's the one for you. It's the path God chose. And though it asks you to walk alone, it'll lead you to a place your wildest dreams couldn't imagine. Like Matthew, you're called to embrace this journey. Don't view solitude as a sign of rejection or failure. See it as an invitation from God. An invitation to step into a sacred space where He can work in you without interruption. Trust the process, even when it feels hard. Even when you face questioning looks or puzzled words from those who don't get why you're not chasing what they chase. God doesn't pull you from the crowd because He wants you lonely. He does it because He's preparing you for something significant. Something that demands focus, patience, and an unshakable faith in His timing. Think of these solitary seasons as moments when God hides you, not because you're worthless, but because He's protecting you, sharpening you for the moment He'll bring you into the light. When you feel drawn to stillness, don't fight it. It's not punishment. It's preparation. There are things God can only reveal to you alone, visions, strategies, plans He's reserved just for your life. The crowd can't hold those things, they'll blur them, distract you with their voices and expectations. But in solitude, you have room to hear, to understand, to receive what God's handing you. And here's the wonder. Solitude isn't just where you're prepared, it's where you're spiritually recharged. Ever wonder why you feel more at ease alone? Why your soul craves quiet moments in a noisy world? It's not because you hate people or want to avoid them, it's because you're in the midst of a renewal. A season where God restores your spirit, refills your soul with His strength, and reshapes your purpose so you can walk with a freshness the crowd can't offer. Imagine your soul as a vessel, every day. When you're among the masses, caught in endless chatter or worldly pressures, that vessel empties a little. The voices, the expectations, the distractions, they all take from you, leaving you drained and weary. But when you step out of the chaos, when you find a quiet place to be alone with God, He takes that vessel and fills it again, not with the world's fleeting things, but with His peace, wisdom, and anointing. That's why you need time alone, not to isolate yourself, but to reconnect with your true source of power. The world might not grasp this. They might think you're strange for not always being around, for choosing silence over noise. But you're not here to live their way. You're here to live God's way. This spiritual recharge is like a phone needing to be plugged in. If you keep using it non-stop, letting it get swept into clamor and constant demands, it'll die fast. But when you connect it to the source, when you let it rest and refuel, it's stronger than ever. You're the same. Time alone with God is how you recharge, how you realign with your divine power source. Picture yourself on a quiet hill, the sun dipping below the horizon, only the wind and God's presence surrounding you. In that moment, no voices distract you, no pressures weigh you down, just you and Him. That's where your spirit is renewed, where you feel a peace the world can't give, where you're reminded you don't need to chase the crowd to feel whole. Solitude isn't avoidance, it's consecration, a way you lean into God so He can restore you from within. The season of solitude you're walking through isn't abandonment, it's a divine appointment. A moment when God has marked you for a sacred purpose. And in that calling, He sometimes pulls you aside, away from the crowd, to ready you for what's ahead. To the world, solitude might look like isolation, something sad or pitiful, but in God's hands, it's a furnace of transformation, where He shapes you, strengthens you, and reveals a deeper purpose you were created to fulfill. Look back at Matthew's journey. He didn't chase fleeting pleasures or crowd approval, but embraced stillness so God could work within him. And the result was a living testament to the power of solitude when placed in his hands. Like Jesus retreating to quiet hills to pray or standing alone in Gethsemane to surrender to his Father's will. Your solitude is a holy space, where heaven meets earth, where your soul communes with your Creator. In a world that glorifies busyness, popularity, and constant connection, your willingness to step aside, to sit in God's presence, sets you apart. Don't fear it, cherish it. For it's in those solitary moments that God speaks loudest, clarifies your vision, and equips you for the road ahead with a strength the crowd can't provide. As you reflect on this journey, know that God is doing something within you, something that requires silence. That demands you step away from the world's noise to hear his voice. The crowd might not understand, but they don't need to. Your path isn't for their approval, but for God's glory. You've been chosen to carry a burden that demands focus, a purpose that requires clarity. And not everyone can walk this road with you. But take heart. God is with you every step of the way. Even when you feel alone, he's there, preparing you in the stillness so you can emerge with power and a renewed sense of your mission. I challenge you today to see your solitude not as a burden, but as a blessing, a space of spiritual renewal, a moment when God is shaping you for the greatness he's ordained. Don't shy away from stepping out of the chaos, from the crowd's opinions, for your destiny is too vital to be diluted by distractions. Embrace the stillness, lean into the solitude, let God speak to you, guide you, and prepare you for what's coming, for when he's finished his work in the hidden places, you'll step out stronger, clearer, and more ready than ever to fulfill the purpose you were chosen for.